The Pikes Peak Highway is a 12.5 mile, 156 turn, super steep, insanely dangerous mountain road in Colorado. And for over 100 years, people have been racing on it. It is truly one of the most intense and exciting race events that you'll ever see, and it's also one of the most dangerous. So let's dig into the history of this insane race to see how this brutal hill climb has pushed motorsports to new heights and has pushed drivers far beyond their limits. I'm Guff, this is Albon, let's get started. This episode is sponsored by Avalon King. Pikes Peak, one of the highest summits in the Rockies, a picturesque mountainside nestled right next to Colorado Springs. For most people, it's an enjoyable hike, a convenient skiing destination. But for some, well, it's the craziest race in the country. Every single year, racers from around the globe come to challenge this insane mountain road. It's a grueling competition with hundreds of drivers and some of the fastest machines on four wheels. But it wasn't always this way. Pikes Peak used to just be any old mountain in the Rockies. It was named after Zebulon Pike, the 19th century explorer who first climbed the mountain. Well, I say climbed, but Zebulon Pike only managed to make it about 3/4 of the way up to Mount Rosa before giving up and swearing to the world that this mountain would never be climbed by man. Of course, another explorer ended up reaching the summit just 14 years later, but that's besides the point. This was a tall and treacherous mountain. Yet, despite it all, people continued to try and make the climb. And thanks to the Colorado Gold Rush, there were even buildings and train cars being built all the way up the mountain. In 1888, they even built the Pikes Peak Carriage Road. And now, even you and your nana could drive up Pikes Peak, assuming you had a car, and enjoy that crisp mountain air. Now, this little carriage road was fine for tourists, but miners wanted a more substantial way to carry up supplies. Most notable of which was a gentleman by the name of Spencer Penrose. Penrose was an American mining magnate. He made a fortune mining gold, silver, and copper in the Colorado countryside. And he decided it would be in his best interest to make sure that travel on Pikes Peak was a lot easier. So in 1915, he ponied up $263,000. That's about $7.3 million in today's money, and built the Pikes Peak Highway. This was a 19-mile twisting and turning spaghetti of a road that made it all the way up to the summit. Penrose, being a savvy businessman, wanted to make sure that he would get a return on this investment. And so just a year later, in 1916, he announced to the world that he would be starting the National Pikes Peak Hill Climbing Contest. It was an automotive time trial that raced 12.5 miles up the mountainside, with 156 perilous turns, 10% grades, and 2,000-foot drop-offs with no guardrails in sight. A terrifying race, borderline idiotic, but Penrose knew that's exactly what it needed to be. Speed demons from all over the country were abuzz about the race, and big-time racers like Barney Oldfield and Eddie Rickenbacker committed to entering. Entry fees were up to $50, and there was a cash prize of $2,000 for the winner. But Penrose being Penrose, there was also a trophy, plated with silver and gold, and it was called, yes, the Penrose Trophy. As race day approached, more and more drivers were signing up for the race, with the only other sanctioned race of this size being the Indianapolis 500. And by the time summer finally rolled around, the entire United States was anxious to see who would dominate Pikes Peak. August 10th, 1916. The first ever Pikes Peak hill climb was finally here. It was a 3-day event from the 10th to the 12th, and some of the best known names in the country had showed up to compete. Ralph Mulford showed up in his 76 horsepower Hudson as the man to beat. He was the national driving champion in 1911 after all, after winning the Indy 500. Barney Oldfield, the first man to ever hit 60 miles per hour in a circle track race and future Hall of Famer, was set to show up in a very expensively built Delage. And these were just a few of the fierce competition expected to battle in the race to the top. Ralph Mulford immediately set the tone out of the gate. On the first day of the event, in practice, he summited the peak in 18 minutes and 24 seconds. That was a record time that would go on to last 8 years. But the first day wasn't officially timed, it was just practice. The second day was when the real points counted. And if I was a gambling man, I would have put my money on Mulford. But what nobody accounted for was the 22-year-old Elyas. Rea was the youngest driver in the event, and he was in the smallest car, a Romano Demon Special. It was equipped with an 8-cylinder, 125 horsepower airplane engine on a custom modified chassis. And Elyas was a complete stranger to everybody in the motorsports scene. And that anonymity was his wild card, because out of the blue, Rea pushed that Romano Special to the finish line in just 22 minutes and 55 seconds. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that time was much slower than yesterday's 18-minute record run. And you're right, but the weather on this day was brutal. And this was the day that the times counted. Mulford, the fan favorite, crossed the finish line a full 45 seconds after Rea's time, earning him second place. And so Elyas took home the first ever and very extravagant Penrose Trophy, along with the $2,000 prize money and the priceless title of King of the Hill. Now, there was also another class at this event, the motorcycle class. And it was Floyd Clymer that won the motorcycle class with a time of 21 minutes and 58 seconds in his Excelsior motorcycle, the same motorcycle used by 19 of the 29 entrants in the race. And fun fact, the Excelsior was built by Ignaz Schwinn. Yes, that Schwinn. And that was it. Year one was in the books. The event was a massive success with over 650 news outlets covering the event, and many of the drivers being thrust into the limelight for their participation in this historic race. As for Elyas, well, he went on to become more of a myth, a legend than anything else. You see, Rea was the youngest driver on the mountain and the most unsuspecting. The whole country would know his name by Monday morning in the newspapers, but when the world needed him most, he vanished. Elyas was never heard from again after that victory. He went away quietly, never raced again publicly, never spotted again in the sport. But as for the story of Pikes Peak, well, that was just beginning. With how much press the hill climb got the first year, any racer dumb enough to pay money to risk their own life was now on alert, counting down the days until they had a chance at the hill climb. There was just one problem though. Pikes Peak was cancelled. 1 year after its inauguration, the Pikes Peak hill climb was over. Why? Well, on April 4th, 1917, the US Senate voted 82-6 to declare war on Germany, thus starting the First World War. Now, I won't go into World War I. I'm sure our public school educations did a fine job confusing us enough. All you need to know is, in 1920, the coast was clear, and it was finally time for Pikes Peak to return. Just like how it's time for our sponsor segment to return. This episode is sponsored by Avalon King. This is Guff, and this is Guff's car. And Guff likes his car, but he doesn't like how filthy, dusty, and dirty his car gets. Terrible roads, construction, brake dust. It seems like no matter how clean he tries to keep the car, it always looks like doo-doo. But now we can fix it, thanks to science. Avalon King's Armor Shield 9 is a ceramic coating that covers all the hard surfaces of your car, including windows, lights, and plastics. It's like wax, but on steroids. Armor Shield uses nanotechnology to seal all the surface pores, and it cures to a hard, hydrophobic, glass-like glossy shield. It protects your car's paint from dirt, mud, scratches, and the elements, and it's guaranteed to last 2 whole years. And the best part, Armor Shield is totally DIY and easy to apply. So you can have a professional looking shine and perfect water beading, right from the comfort of your garage, all while saving hundreds of dollars over the competition. So hit the link in the description to get your own Armor Shield kit and give your car the protection and shine it deserves with Avalon King. Now back to the video. The 1920 hill climb was an exciting one. Otto Loesch managed to beat Elyas' time by 30 seconds in his Lexington Special, and so began the yearly tradition of breaking records at Pikes Peak. 1921 saw the record fall to the 19-minute range, 1923 had it hit the 18s, and in 1924, the final Penrose Trophy would be awarded to Otto Loesch again in his Lexington Special. Now, final doesn't mean that Pikes Peak was over. It was just that the trophy was getting a little too extravagant, and it was a $10,000 liability that Spencer Penrose had to worry about every year. Penrose's marketing experiment for the highway was done. Now, the event was just about racing. Within a few years, the Pikes Peak Hill Climb would become one of the top events in the country. And Glenn Schultz, an auto parts store owner, became one of the first racers to dominate the mountain. Sure, a few other drivers won before Schultz's victory in 1923, but nobody took over like he did. That 1923 win was in his Hudson Essex, and he took the new track record. Then he won again in 1926 in a Stutz, then again in 1927. Then he said, this isn't fast enough, and so he fitted a driver-actuated supercharger to his car and won again in 1928. Then they banned superchargers in 1929. Looks like Schultz's winning streak was a psych. He won again in 1930 in the infamous Stutz DV32. Then in 1931 he got second place, but in 1932 he won again, and again in 1933. Okay, you get it. The point is, he dominated Pikes Peak, and he won all but one of those years in a Stutz. Now, Stutz was an American car brand for the rich and famous that was based out of Indiana, but one of their claims to fame was making America's first sports car. And they weren't just making any old sports cars. The Stutz Motor Company had a long list of racing accolades. Pole at the Indy 500 in 1912, third place in 1915, second in 1919, and second in the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1928, and third in the French Grand Prix that same year. But Pikes Peak? Oh, Pikes Peak was special to the Stutz brand. The race to the clouds in Colorado couldn't be won in just any hunk of metal. Pikes Peak was quickly becoming iconic of American racing, and America's first sports car was the perfect machine for the throne. A Stutz car would go on to win 10 times between 1926 and 37. 6 of those wins came with Glenn Schultz behind the wheel. Tragically, Glenn died of an illness in 1936, leaving behind an everlasting legacy at the peak. But it wasn't long before another adrenaline junkie came for the throne. That junkie's name was Louis Unser. That last name might ring a bell for motorsports fanatics, but if not, here's the story. Louis Unser was from a small town in Illinois until his family moved to Colorado Springs in the early 1900s. He entered his first hill climb at Pikes Peak in 1926, igniting an iconic rivalry with Glenn Schultz. Now, you know how the first few years went by now. Schultz was on the podium celebrating every single year. But Louis Unser took one last shot at the king in 1934 and finally won his first overall victory in the hill climb. He went on to win again in 1936 and again in 1937. And like I mentioned before, Glenn Schultz had won 6 of those total wins for the Stutz Motor Company. But Louis Unser won 3 for Stutz as well. And then in 1937, he switched to a Loop Cafe Special and won it again. And then again in 1938 in the Snowburger Special. A few years went by again before Louis won in 1941 with the Bird Special. And with all these wins, Unser was quite literally on top of the world. Nothing could stop his winning streak at the peak. Well, that is, except for Pikes Peak getting canceled again. Why? Well, for the World War, the sequel. So in 1942, the World War took over, and you guys all know how that went. Then, a few years later, the war ended. And finally, Unser was able to return to the peak in 1946. Of course, he won it in 46 and 47, this time in a Maserati. War changes you, I guess. But nevertheless, Louis just kept winning. His last victory came in 1953. At the age of 58 years old. And he even set a hill record in his Federal Engineering Special with a time of 15 minutes and 15 seconds. And he continued on to compete in the hill climb until 1967, although without any wins. But even still, what a feat that was. By the time he retired, Louis Unser had been racing Pikes Peak for 42 years. He was so old, rumor has it he was using his social security checks to cover the entry fees in those last few years. What a freaking legend. But you know what's even more insane than Louis's legacy? The Unser family legacy. Pikes Peak damn near became a family reunion for the Unser family. Bobby Unser, Louis's nephew, first entered Pikes Peak in 1955. He came in 5th place, behind 2 of his brothers. 3 different Unsers in the top 10 that year. And in 1956, Bobby Unser came back in his Unser Special and won the whole damn thing. Yes, they had their own home-built car wearing the Unser name. And I think by now you guys know where this story is going. He won it all again in 1958, then again in 1959, and then in 1960, and then in 1961, and then again in 1962, all in that Unser Special. In 1963, Bobby won yet again. This time in a Chevrolet 327. 1964 though, Bobby just couldn't take the win. And you're probably thinking, wow, who's the guy that ended Bobby Unser's 6-year winning streak? His freaking little brother, Al Unser. Yes, Bobby's annoying little brother Al was the one who dethroned him in 1964. And then Al went again to win it in 1965. But enough was enough. Bobby couldn't have his little brother showing him up, and so he took his trophy back in 1966. Bobby Unser's last win came in 1968. Or so we thought. Bobby finally decided to take a break from Pikes Peak after that 1968 victory and setting another lap record, with no plans to return as he enjoyed life. But of course, the legendary hill climb continued on. Year by year, drivers battled it out. In 1971, the first non-gasoline powered car won the event. It was a propane-powered 1970 Ford Mustang. In 1978, Errol Kobalon finally beat Bobby Unser's track record. And then in 1984, something interesting happened. You see, news of the annual hill climb and the prowess of its drivers had made its way across the pond. And so 84 was the first year that European racers took part in the hill climb. Behind the wheel were Martin Schanke, a Norwegian driver driving a Ford Escort Mark III, and Michel Mouton from France driving an Audi Sport Quattro. Now, the Audi was especially interesting because a few Americans had driven a Audi Quattro Group B rally car in the 1982 hill climb. And that car competed as is, unmodified from rally spec. And it won twice in 82 and 83. Audi saw this and said, Scheiße, imagine what would happen if the car was fully built for Pikes Peak. And so they built one, a heavily modified version of that Group B rally car, and they called it the Audi Quattro S1. And with it came a whole new era of racing in the Rocky Mountains. You see, the open wheel car dominance of the last 70 years was now over. It was now time for balls to the wall, purpose-built, factory-modified monsters to summit the hill. Michel Mouton in the Audi Quattro S1 set a new track record her first time out in 1984. But she failed to win the overall event. So Michelle came back for blood in 1985, and she broke the Pikes Peak record again and won overall in that Audi Quattro. Now, this feat shouldn't be understated. In a world where, to this day, the official Pikes Peak hill climb website boasts the kings of the hill, Michelle remains the one and only queen of the hill. Suffice to say, Michel Mouton is a bona fide badass, even to this day. And if I'm being honest, she probably deserves her own video considering her trailblazing career. But 1 year after her last win at Pikes Peak, she left Audi to go race at Peugeot. And so Audi approached none other than Bobby Unser and asked him if he wanted to take another crack at getting his record back. And so after 12 long years, Bobby Unser finally returned back to the Pikes Peak hill climb, this time in an Audi Sport Quattro SL. And in typical Unser fashion, Bobby set the track record and got the overall win. This 10th overall victory put him over his uncle Lewis's 9 overall wins, along with 2 stock car class victories and 1 sports car class victory. What a freaking legend. So between Lewis, Bobby, Al, and Jerry, there were now 4 different Unsers to win at the mountain. And then finally, there was Robbie Unser, Bobby's son. Robbie Unser went on to win his first overall victory in 1989 in a Peugeot 405. And he went on to do it 3 more times before he called it quits, which puts the Unser family overall victory count at Pikes Peak at 26 wins. 26 separate years of dominance by the Unsers. That's a quarter of all Pikes Peak there ever was. But when the decade of greed was finally over, the 1990s brought with them an entirely new nation, and one that was dedicated to speed: Japan. In 1992 and 1993, Suzuki won its class with the Suzuki Cultus and ultimately set the new track record with a time of 10 minutes and 44 seconds. That record didn't last long though. In 1994, Rod Millen drove his 1,000 horsepower Toyota Celica to the summit in what forever stands to be the fastest time at Pikes Peak during the gravel era: 10 minutes and 4 seconds, dangerously close to breaking that 10-minute barrier. The very next year, Nobuhiro Monster Tajima rocketed the legendary Suzuki Escudo Pikes Peak to an overall win. Yes, the very same car that basically broke Gran Turismo 2 and 3. And then Rod Millen came back in 1996 with his Toyota Celica and took the win. And then again in 1997, then with his Tacoma, again in 98, and again in 99. It was truly amazing stuff, some of the best racing the world had ever seen. But it must be said, Pikes Peak wasn't all glory and gold. Everything we've talked about so far has made Pikes Peak seem like the greatest race in the world. And while that may be true to some, don't let that fool you. This mountain road was dangerous. 156 corners, many of them totally blind. An ever-evolving road surface, weather even changing multiple times in a single run up the mountain. Driving up Pikes Peak slowly was a sketchy undertaking, so you really had to be a freak to stare at that trail of death and say, "Time me." Wallace Coleman, a participant of the hill climb in 1921, was the first person to lose their life on the hill. His custom Chevy lost control at one of the many hairpins, and he plunged down into a field of boulders. Back then, there was no radio, no cameras watching, so it wasn't until the next driver drove up the hill that Coleman was found, pinned under his car. But by then, it was too late. Coleman's death was a dark cloud over the hill climb. But despite it all, racers were still desperate to participate. Over the years, there were dozens of crashes, many injuries, and a number of deaths, many of which were motorcycle racers. I mean, it was one thing to drive up a steel-caged car up the hill at speed, but to do it with basically zero protection, it was a feat that brushed the grasp of death for many people. But it wasn't just the threat of safety that leveled criticism at the hill climb. In 1998, while Rod Millen was dominating Pikes Peak, a preservation group called the Sierra Club sued the city of Colorado Springs. It was on the grounds that the dirt runoff from driving on the Pikes Peak Highway, as well as from the racing during the hill climb, was polluting and killing the reservoirs and wildlife that existed downhill of it. And after a year of legal battle, the Sierra Club won the lawsuit, and this meant that Pikes Peak couldn't remain as it was. The conclusion was that it needed to be paved over completely, converted from a dangerous, challenging, polluting, yet historically significant gravel road to a standard asphalt road like any other street or highway. Now, it may seem like an unassuming change, but oh boy, it wasn't. Since the beginning, the unpredictability of the Pikes Peak hill climb was part of its draw. It was a bare-knuckled fight between driver and nature itself, a challenge that no other racetrack or even other motorsports could come close to. You had to know where the ruts were, where the dirt piled up. Speed was not given, it was earned, and only the most seasoned drivers understood how to give the hill the respect it deserved in order to go fast. Rod Millen was one of the many drivers that was wholly against the paving of Pikes Peak, but it didn't matter. The lawsuit was clear, and in 2002, they began paving the road. Now, of course, the city couldn't afford to do it all at once, so they did it how most cities in the US do it. They paved 10% of it every year in a completely random order. Yes, that means it took 10 years to finish the road. And for those years in between, you wouldn't know where the dirt road ended and the asphalt began. The road was apparently so bad to drive on that the hill climb almost went out of business in 2006. But the organizers and the drivers persevered, and the hill climb continued to survive. And then, in 2012, the road was finally finished. And despite all the naysayers and bemoaners, everyone was excited to see what this new version of Pikes Peak was like to race on. Turns out it was fast. Like, really fast. A fully paved road meant that drivers could carry much more speed than if they were on dirt, and it didn't take long for records to start shattering once again. In fact, the legendary 10-minute mark was broken the year prior, in 2011, by none other than the monster, Tajima, who set a 9-minute and 51-second run in his Suzuki SX4. This was bonkers fast. The hill climb started all those years ago with drivers doing over 20-minute runs, and here was Monster Tajima doing it in less than half of that. And remember, this was still with the middle section totally unpaved. The next year, with the road fully done, Reese Millen, Rod Millen's son, set a new record at 9 minutes and 46 seconds. And then the next year, Sebastian Loeb came and destroyed that record with an 8 minutes and 13 second run in his Peugeot 208. It turns out this new version of Pikes Peak was anything but a step backwards. It was faster, more accessible, and year by year we saw a bigger and bigger variety of cars attacking the hill. Ken Block brought his 1400 horsepower methanol fueled 65 Mustang Mustang to the hill in 2017, and he gymkhana'd his way up to the summit. And now even electric cars were beginning to show their strengths on Pikes Peak. Their biggest strength being the fact that they were largely undeterred by the insane elevation change. You see, the thinner air up that high meant that internal combustion engines were choked for oxygen, often producing significantly less power numbers than they would at sea level. EVs, on the other hand, were all go all the time, like the interestingly named E0 PP03, which stunned the competition in 2015 when Reese set a 9-minute and 7-second run and took the overall win. Of course, that was still slower than Sebastian Loeb's 2013 run, but worry not, it only took a few more years for electric drive to catch up. In 2018, Volkswagen decided they were going to enter Pikes Peak after a long racing hiatus. That hiatus being in direct response to the Dieselgate emission scandal in 2015. And so Volkswagen desperately needed to repair their image in the automotive world. What better way to do that than to enter an all-electric race car in the Pikes Peak hill climb? And so their 2018 entry was the fully electric Volkswagen ID.R. This was a full carbon monocoque race car, reminiscent of a Le Mans prototype. It weighed just 2,400 pounds fully loaded, and it was propelled by 2 electric motors that created a combined 680 horsepower. This thing looked mean as hell, and oh boy, did it mean business. Their goal was to beat the current EV record, again set by Reese at 8 minutes and 57 seconds. A formidable goal, but just seeing it in practice was enough for onlookers to realize this wasn't going to beat that old EV record. It was going to decimate it. On its official timed run, driver Romain Dumas and the ID.R averaged nearly 94 miles per hour, going up a freaking mountain. And when they crossed the line, their final time was 7 minutes and 57 seconds. Not only beating the EV record, but handily beating the record for any car by nearly 16 seconds. This was truly a triumph for electric drive and a much needed win for Volkswagen's reputation. But even more than that, it was a reminder of what an amazing stage Pikes Peak was. Few moments in motorsports have done as much to legitimize these radical shifts forward as these moments found in Pikes Peak. It is a testament to the tenacity of motorsports, and it's constantly showing us what the future of the motor car looks like. Of course, it isn't without sacrifice. The countless injuries and even deaths over the years are a heartbreaking reality of this level of racing. And the elimination of motorcycle racing after Carlin Dunn's tragic death in 2019 is still a tender wound in the hearts of Pikes Peak fans everywhere. But in the end, the allure of the hill is enough to keep it going all these years on. And every year we get the privilege to watch drivers like Robin Shute, Clint Vaschholz, Randy Pobst, Brett Dickey, Will Ah Young, and so many more attempt this challenge, perform this ritual called the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. This year, 2022, Pikes Peak celebrates its 100th annual hill climb. 100 years of absolute bonkers racing up a sketchy mountainside, all in the name of speed and sport. And just a few months from now, 80 drivers will once again test their mettle and risk their lives to see for the 100th time who will be King of the Hill. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.